Our base has a reputation of having unexplainable things happen. In the surrounding woods, I found out about it a few weeks into my assignment, as my team stayed up one night talking, and Miles brought it up, telling us a story. Past researchers who have spent time in our base have reported unexplainable sightings while they were on hikes through the woods that have given our outpost a reputation. It's said that anyone who works here will have at least one strange experience before they leave. The moment I heard this, I became enthralled with the idea. My love of the otherworldly. During our time there, all 5 of us have experienced one strange event, and I want to share our stories with you. I would have posted sooner, but I was worried that my employers might find out. So I waited until these stories were redacted from our outpost records. Most of them write them off as pranks played by the other researchers to keep our outpost reputation alive, but I believe that each one is real. I have asked each of them to write out their story, so I could compile them after editing. Yes, Miles, I'm looking at you.
There's story.
I was out on a hike with Miles and Jeanette after a particularly bad snowstorm had taken place the night before. Our job was that many equipment stations set up throughout the woods and make sure the storm hadn't damaged any of the technology. The clouds had disappeared after the storm, leaving us with a sunny day and a good mood. Miles told us funny college stories, and Jeanette and I laughed as we walked through the peaceful woods, listening to the birds who had flown back from their southern vacation. A little too early. It was a great day, and it certainly didn't feel like anything unusual was going to happen. We arrived at the first station to find that some of the equipment had to be reset, but soon we were on our way. By the time we arrived at the second station, almost an hour had passed, and we all became aware at how inefficient it was to go to each station together. It was protocol to stick together on days after snowstorms due to possible changes in terrain and the increased possibility of someone getting hurt. But the moment Miles suggested that we split up, Jeanette didn't spare a second to agree. We divided the remaining stations amongst ourselves and set off in different directions. I had chosen the stations that were easiest to get to because I was admittedly a little afraid of getting hurt and left in the woods alone. They were closer than the others, but still a hike away, and I was able to spend some alone time in the beauty of the forest. The sun shone down through the thin pine trees along the trail, and I couldn't help but smile at the whole scene. I was in a good mood, so I began to whistle a made-up song, which most who know me will tell you is a common and very annoying thing I do. As I was nearing my first station, I suddenly heard a loud whistle from far off the right side of the path. It was more defined than the bird song I had heard with Jeanette and Miles, but it only lasted for a moment, and sounded very far off. I wasn't sure what it was, so I walked a little quicker and hoped that it came from a bird species I wasn't familiar with. I reached the first station shortly after to find that everything was working fine, and proceeded to make the journey to the next one. I reached the second station in half an hour to find its barometer had fallen in the snow during the storm. I reattached it to its mount and then left. It was on my way to my third and last station I was assigned to that it happened. This station was the furthest I had taken, and it was located near the border of the outpost territory. It was a 45-minute hike, and I heard it about a half hour in. It was the whistle I had heard from earlier. It came from the right side of the path, and it was louder, signaling that the source of the noise was was closer. I froze when I heard it, but then decided I would continue down the path at a faster pace like before. I took about 4 steps before I heard another tone from the same place. I proceeded forward again, but slower this time. I walked until I had moved about 20 feet from when I first heard the noise, when I heard the tone again. Suddenly, I started to hear a bunch of different whistle noises coming from the same area, off from the right of the path. They would overlap and change volume and pitch. I could tell they were coming closer. I was about to run towards the next station, not because I was afraid, because it was the only instinct I felt at that time. What was happening didn't make sense, but I didn't feel like I was in danger. I was about to leave. The random tone suddenly stopped and turned into a melody. The sound became pleasing, and I could pick out a few chords as I listened. The sound kept approaching, but there was something about the song. It's familiar and calming. When the sound seemed to only be a dozen feet away from the trail, I realized it was the song I had made up while I was whistling. Whatever was making the sound was behind a few pine trees beside the path, about 15 feet behind me. It paused for a moment, then pushed through the branches and came into the center of the path to sit and look at me. I couldn't comprehend what it was. My mind told me that it didn't belong in this world, and that it couldn't be here, but I could clearly see it. It had the body of a hairless pit bull, but its head looked like it had been replaced with some sort of bee's nest. It walked on all fours and sat in the path like a dog, but its body was wrinkled and fleshy. It looked like it was made of paper, like it was made of paper mache, and formed a couple dozen hexagon openings where its face should be. The holes went deep and formed long hexagon-shaped tubes that stretched to the back of its beehive head. It had no face, but it sat patiently and faced me. I was frozen looking at it, and a few seconds later, it began whistling my song again. Tones seemed to come from the holes in its face. It sat there for a few seconds whistling, and I stood motionless. Again, I didn't feel in danger, but I did feel uneasy, as if this shouldn't be possible. I don't know why I did it, but I decided to whistle back. I started to whistle a new song, and the moment I did, the thing crooked its head, like a confused dog would, and stopped making any noise. This startled me. So I stopped whistling again, and we both remained motionless, facing each other in silence. The thing's head returned upright, and then it started to whistle the song I was trying to make only a few seconds ago. It then stood up and trotted off into the woods, left side of the path.